don't we get started? So welcome everybody. I'm Carla Cosillo, and we are here today for Shop the Supermarket in a Healthy Way. So welcome to our webinar today. Just a few housekeeping guidelines before we get started. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. Keep your video off, and that's just to decrease any interference during the presentation. Okay. We do have a chat feature, so if you have a question or a comment about anything during the presentation, please you can use that. My coworker Corey will be watching over the chat box for me. Okay. Also, we are going to be doing a drawing towards the end of the presentation. So the winner will be notified privately through chat. So by the time we reach the questions portion of the webinar, please make sure you're checking your chat to see if you are our winner for today. All right. So I'd like to present our speaker for today. We have Tiffany McClure with us. She is a registered dietitian. She has been with Florida Healthcare Plan since 2018. She does have her bachelor's degree from the University of Florida State University. And she has many years of experience in this field, about 23 years. Okay? So we're very lucky to have Tiffany with us. So thank you, Tiffany, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Carla, and thank you for those who are present today. My hope is that after this presentation, you will learn a little bit about these three things when it comes to grocery shopping in a healthy way. First, we're hoping that you're going to learn what some of the healthier choices from each food group or section of your grocery store are. Secondly, how to look at a food label and discern that information so that you are able to make choices that are right for you in your specific health goals. And lastly, I want to talk just a few minutes about some phone apps and how those might be useful for you so that you can get the information you need in order to make healthy choices. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the produce section, since it is always healthy to add more plant-based foods into your diet. And so what better place to go than the produce section to get those fresh fruits and vegetables. You can also get fresh herbs here. And then sometimes you can also find those whole nuts and seeds and natural peanut butters in this section. So you want to focus more on those whole fruits and vegetables because you're going to get that fiber and tons of micronutrients out of them. Vary the colors of those fruits and vegetables that you're getting in order to get that variety of vitamins and minerals. Go for the dark green and deep orange vegetables. And also remember that those peels are good sources of fiber. So you definitely want to go easy on the dried fruits that can sometimes be in this section because dried fruits are more concentrated. So they're going to have more sugar, so you need to decrease those portion sizes. And then obviously things that are covered in yogurt or chocolate can add some sugar and therefore calories. Coconut you want to be aware of because even though it is a natural plant food, it is a source of saturated fat. So just use it sparingly.
A quick poll question for you. What is the most common fruit bought in the U.S.? We have apples, oranges, bananas, and strawberries. All right, so we'll end our poll. Okay. All righty. Okay. So the correct answer is the bananas. Okay, those are the most common fruit that we buy.
All right. Look like a couple people said oranges and strawberries, but yeah, bananas are, and it's easy to see because they're super convenient. You peel the peel away and it's ready to go. Very portable. So, all right. So next we're going to talk about those meats. A lot of us do know that it's better to choose the lean meats, but what are they? So we're talking about your ground sirloins, the eye of round, obviously the lean ground beef. You want to look for 90% or higher. So when you see the percentages on the ground meats, then when it says, for example, 90-10, that means it's 90% beef, 10% fat. So you always want more of the beef and less of the fat, obviously. Even things like extra lean ham and those plant-based meats like your soy tofu and other meat alternatives are great ways to get protein in without as much saturated fat and sometimes lower calories. Therefore, you want to go easy on those higher fat meats. You can see some of them listed here. Ground pork is one. And then, of course, those organ meats are going to be higher in fat, therefore saturated fat. One other thing to consider in this meat section, I'm sorry, Carla, is that sometimes the pre-prepared meats can be higher in fat, like the meatballs and the hamburgers that are already done for you, and they're also going to cost you more. So be aware of that. They can have a lot more calories and fat. So the poultry and seafood section, I think a lot of us do also know that these are good choices and generally are a little bit lower than some of our red meats and beefs. And so we tend to lean towards these when we're looking at our health goals. So what about doing things like ground chicken breast and turkey breast versus just regular ground chicken or turkey? You're getting more of the white meat when you do the ground chicken breast and turkey breast, therefore less calories, less fat. You want to remove the skin from your chicken or buy skinless chicken breast. And then also you're wanting to look at fish that is, not breaded, that has, no added sauces. Specifically, it's healthy to look for those fatty fishes like your salmons and tuna, because even though they may have more calories, you're getting those omega-3 fats, which is a very good anti-inflammatory fat for you. So the ones you want to go easy on, again, would be chicken or turkey with the skin. Duck is a higher fat meat. The fried or breaded seafoods, and then, of course, those ground chickens or turkeys. And yet get the chicken breast or turkey breast. So what about the dairy section? So we're talking specifically about things like your milks, your creamers, sour creams, yogurt, and eggs. Of course, we want to look at doing the non-fat or low-fat milks versus the 2% or whole, just because you're going to get the same amount of protein and calcium out of the skim or low-fat milks. You're just not going to get as much saturated fat or calories, which is wonderful when you're concerned about weight loss and or heart health. Also consider the milk alternatives like maybe almond milks or soy milks, but you want to consider if they have added sugar or not. So your unsweetened milk alternatives like the unsweetened almond milks can be a great way to get in calcium without a lot of calories or even carbohydrates. So that's something to consider. If you like to have coffee, using the fat-free or sugar-free non-dairy creamers can be the fat-free or sugar-free non-dairy creamers can be a great way to get less calories and fat when you're adding that to your coffee. So also looking at things like low-fat or plain yogurt, even as a substitute for sour cream if you're not using light sour cream. If you're using plain yogurt, you're getting protein that you don't get out of the sour cream. The low-fat sour cream is also fine if you don't like yogurt. And then eggs are a wonderful source of protein. However, sometimes those egg yolks are going to have, more cholesterol than you might want. And so the egg whites or egg substitutes are just protein without that cholesterol and fat, and they're very low in calorie. So you can see here on the right some of the things we are comparing to the things on the left. So what about cheese? If you're like me, I love cheese, and cheese, glorious cheese. So it's definitely a great way to get protein in, but we have to, just be cautious because along with that protein comes some saturated fat and calories because it does come from an animal. So we want to make sure that we're choosing fat-free or low-fat cottage cheese, ricotta cheese, cream cheeses. They even make reduced fat feta cheeses. If you like spreadable cheeses, maybe on special occasions, go for the lower fat or light versions. The string cheeses make a great snack or part of a meal. You just want to look for the light or maybe ones made with part skim mozzarella. And then cheese alternatives can also be worked into a healthy meal plan if maybe you're vegan or vegetarian or you just don't tolerate dairy. So, what about butter? I think this is a very controversial topic for some folks because a lot of people feel like, well, there's margarine and these other spreads out here, but how good are they? Because we hear that they have chemicals added or trans fats. And so that can be correct. When we think about stick butters and stick margarines, a lot of times those are higher in saturated fat, maybe even have trans fat. So you want to look for vegetable spreads that do not have hydrogenated fats or partially hydrogenated fats in them. Margarine has kind of that bad stigma to it because back in the day it did have the trans fat because they were taking a healthy vegetable oil and they were hydrogenating it or whipping hydrogen in it to get this certain texture and spreadable product that they wanted, but it was transforming it into a less heart healthy fat. It's even worse for us than saturated fat. Nowadays, I think they've realized, consumers have realized this, and there are manufacturers putting out better products that do not contain the trans fat. So read your ingredient label, make sure that there are not hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils in there, and that underneath the fat, which we're going to look at labels a little bit later, that you do not see trans fat in that product as well. If you choose to use butter in place of margarine, that's obviously a choice up to you. Some people feel better about that, but just remember it has saturated fat, so use it sparingly. So the bakery section, this is where we can find a lot of those goodies that can be tempting and for us to get off path, towards our goals. So what do? Well, first we want to, when we're looking for whether it's breads or things like that, go for the whole grain. Get a lot of fiber out of those products, whether it's whole wheat, oatmeal, English muffins, and bagels. You can also find reduced fat muffins, smaller sized muffins, and even something like Angel Food Cake could possibly work into a meal plan. Angel Food Cake may have added sugar in it, but it is a lower fat type of dessert food. So if you're not concerned as much on the sugar and have an occasional slice of Angel Food Cake, it may work out for you. Now, things you want to go easier on are obviously those pastries and desserts that may have lots of those trans fats. A lot of commercial baked goods do have trans fats in them, so be aware of that. The pizza doughs may be high in fat, garlic bread that already has the butter on it, and then of course those refined white products can also be less healthy for you. What about the prepared food section? We definitely all find ourselves ending up here some days when we've had a hectic day and, we're looking at plan B for the dinner that evening. So rotisserie chickens, pulling away that skin can be a healthy way to, get a quick meal on the table, and then you can use it for future meals. Sushi is a very low calorie food. It has seafood. Sometimes you can get the sushi with vegetables in it. How about those green salads or fruit salads? If you're buying pre-prepared pasta salads, you want to look for the ones that have more of a oil-based or vinegar-based salad dressing versus the mayonnaise-based. Hummus can be a great snack and or component of a meal, and you can pair it nicely with those non-starchy vegetables from the produce section. Or if you're looking for pre-prepared soups, focus on the broth-based soups versus the cream-based soups, and if even possible, looking for the lower sodium ones. Another thing we recommend going easy on, obviously, is the fried chicken. When you fry something, you're going to have more fat because that skin and that breading is going to retain all that fat it was fried in. Also, the sandwiches or wraps, be cautious because sometimes they're putting processed meats on those or mayonnaises. If you can find sandwiches or wraps made with multigrain breads, without the condiments like the mayonnaise on there and maybe the leaner lunch meats like your turkeys and things like that, it's a better way to go. Speaking of those deli meats and sandwiches, we want to choose things like turkey or chicken breast, lower fat cold cuts, lower fat hot dogs are even fine. You can even find the vegetarian hot dogs and sausages. Canadian bacon is pretty much just a lean ham that's in a circle. And even tofu can be a great way to get some protein in this section. You want to be aware of those processed higher sodium things like your sausages, hot dogs, and bacon that are not lower fat or lower sodium. So frozen foods, These can be a great way to stock up on some, fruits and vegetables, and even some snacks and breakfast foods. You just need to know what you're looking for. The benefit to having frozen foods is that they have a longer shelf life or longer, flexibility in when you use them. And a lot of times you can find them without sauces, added sodium or fats. And what they've done is they've just flash frozen them at the peak of their season, and then they're there for a little bit longer of a time for your use. You can also find whole grain or multi-grain waffles, which is a great component to a breakfast or a snack with a little peanut butter on it. You're also wanting to see if you can find some, maybe the fish fillets that do not have sauces or marinades, and they're not necessarily breaded. You can also find your tofu and your soy-based and some veggie meat alternatives here as well. You want to be cautious for, like I mentioned before, some of the vegetables and fruits that may have added sugars or sauces or even added sodium in them. Watching out for those pizzas. Some of them can have quite a bit of fat, looking at the labels, and of course some of those desserts. So what about the condiments? So condiments cover everything from your typical ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise to things like the oils, salad dressings, and vinegars. So you want to choose the vegetable oils that are mainly monounsaturated fats. So we're talking about olive oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, and peanut oils. Also, flaxseed oil is an unsaturated fat. It's more of a polyunsaturated fat for the omega-3 anti-inflammatory that it has in it. So that's also a good choice. If you like mayonnaise, looking for the fat-free or light version, they even make one that is a olive oil-based mayonnaise. Looking for the lower fat or fat-free salad dressings. Just be aware, though, that sometimes when you get the lower fat or fat-free salad dressings, to make up for the flavor loss that happens sometimes when they take the fat out, sometimes they're adding sugar. So depending on what your specific goals are, you want to look at those labels and see exactly what they're putting in it. Vinegars are a great condiment to use because it is pretty much very, very negligible calories, very unlikely to have added sugars, but it gives you that pungent flavor. Beware of the ketchups, because sometimes they're adding a lot of sugar in different brands. They do make no added sugar ketchups, so you can look for those. So definitely be aware of things like shortening or lard that are in the condiment aisle. That's going to be heavy in the saturated fats. Even though coconut is from a plant, palm and kernel oil as well, they are all sources of saturated fat. So you want to treat it like a saturated fat, similar to butter. Your regular mayonnaises may provide a lot of calories in a small amount and a lot of fat, so be cautious of that. And then, of course, those creamy style dressings are going to have a little more saturated fat in them. So we're picking back up with cereals, grains, and pasta aisle. So we definitely want to get, when we're eating these types of foods, we want to get the most bang for our buck. So we want them to be high fiber, give us servings of those whole grains that are dense in some of these B vitamins. We want things like oatmeal, brown rice, quinoa. If you are eating pasta, consider even the ones that are made with dried bean flour, because you're not only getting fiber, but you're getting a little extra protein. And then if you do have allergies or maybe even gluten intolerances, things like that, there are grain-free pastas that can fit into your plan. You also want to be aware when you're looking at cereals, even though they appear healthy from the way that they're made and they may be whole grain, sometimes they are adding sugars and possibly even saturated fats like coconut oils in there. So be cautious on that. Some of the packaged grains like your rices or pasta mixes may seem like a healthy choice, but they could be very high in sodium or fat depending on what kind of sauce or seasoning packet they have in them. Obviously, your canned pastas can be high in sodium and sometimes higher in fat. Ramen noodles are kind of one that's in the middle here. Ramen noodles on their own may not be as necessarily a bad choice or an obstacle for you, but sometimes that seasoning packet is very high in sodium. So maybe you can discard the packet and use your own low sodium seasonings, or use half of the packet and then add those wonderful vegetables and lean proteins in there with it. So we're kind of at that miscellaneous aisle, or things that maybe we're not sure where they are. There can be different locations depending on your store. So let's talk a little bit about using whole wheat corn or whole wheat flour tortillas. Those are going to be a little less calorie or higher in fiber. You can even use things like fat-free evaporated milk in your coffees. You want to look for canned fruit if you're using that in its own juice or without sugar added. Definitely looking at the lower sodium canned vegetables or no salt added types of vegetables. Low fat or natural or low sugar peanut butters, or even peanut butter alternatives. Someone had asked in an earlier webinar about the peanut butter powders. And so those can definitely be a way to get that peanut butter taste and peanuts in there with a lower calorie, amount per serving, because they've dehydrated the peanuts and ground them up. So some of that fat has been removed. So you don't get the benefit of the monounsaturated fat as much, but you're still getting less calories. So that's an option for you if you're interested in the peanut butter powders like PB2. They can be worked into smoothies or sprinkled on your yogurt or whatever you prefer. You can also look for fruit spreads in place of jelly. So those fruit spreads that are made from real fruit and don't have added sugar to them can be beneficial. Salsas can be something great as a condiment too to add in. They're generally low in calorie. Now the jarred salsas may have a little bit of sodium, but you can also look for the salsa that could be by the hummus or in the by the deli, and that's a little fresher, so that's also an option. Looking for the unrefined flours, more of the whole wheat flours, and then certainly dried beans that are lower in sodium or no added salt can be a great way to work some protein in for a low cost. So again, making sure you're watching out for the regular flour tortillas that may be made with lard, so they're going to be higher in fat and they won't have that fiber that you would get out of the whole wheat ones. Obviously, potato chips, candy, sodas. Some trail mixes, that kind of varies. Just look at what they've put in it. Sometimes they sneak in M&Ms and things like that in there, and it looks healthy, but then you're like, wow, there's more M&Ms than nuts. So just look at what you're getting there. And then, of course, some of the dessert mixes can be quite high in calories. So now we're on to label reading.
Okay. All right. So before we start talking about labels, we're going to do a quick poll. So it says, foods with added sugar always have the word sugar listed in the ingredients list. And the answer is, it is true. They do have to now have all the sugars listed in the ingredients list. And Tiffany will talk about these little added sugars.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'm so glad that was a poll question, because that is one of the new features on the labels that are now required to be on products. So the FDA, I believe it was the beginning of 2020, has made it a requirement that manufacturers use this new label on their products, because they've found that it's more consumer friendly and it's going to be easier to figure out what you're getting in your food. So that is one of the changes. As you see here under that carbohydrates, as most of you may know, are foods that have either natural sugar or added sugar in them. So if you are someone who is looking at carbohydrates, whether it's for blood sugar management, or you're just watching how much you're taking in, think of total carbohydrate as a heading, and then underneath there's like a subheading of some different components of that. So the added sugar is going to fall under that total carbohydrate heading. And so one thing to note is that added sugars are already included in that total carbohydrate number. You don't have to do any math here. It's not really meant to try to see if you have math skills. That total carbohydrate number includes the added sugars. However, it is itemized because some consumers want to know how much of that carbohydrate is naturally occurring versus added by the manufacturer. And this is how we can tell. So the American Heart Association recommends that women have 25 grams or less of added sugars per day. And for men, the recommendation is 38 grams or less of added sugars per day. So you'll be able now to identify how much of that recommended amount per day you're getting out of a serving of a product with this added sugar line. Folks who are looking to lose weight may want to, look at this, because if we're trying to keep our calories low, we certainly don't want to use all of our calories on sugar calories because they don't contain a lot of nutrients, or they're empty calories. So this can help you discern that. So when I say you don't really have to add anything in there, it won't add up, and it'll frustrate you if you try, because you can see here under the total carbohydrate, there's dietary fiber, there's sugars, and then there's the added sugars. And so when you count those numbers up, that's 26. And you can see that 37 is there. And you're thinking, well, what else is in this product? So there can be other things that count towards the carbohydrate in this product that do not have to be itemized here. Maybe it's starch fillers or things like that. So they are required by law to claim them in the total carbohydrate, but they are not required to list them. So I wanted to go ahead and address that, since we had just talked about some of the sugars with the poll question of the added sugars. But I just do want to run through how to read the food label. So it's always important to start with the serving size. And so you can see here the serving size is 2/3 of a cup. One of the new changes is they made that bolder, because there are some folks who didn't understand that this wasn't for the entire package or container. So it's important to start with that serving size. And all of that information below is pertaining to only that serving size. If you decide this serving size is not right for you, because this serving size is a suggestion, it is not what you have to consume. Maybe you decide you want to have 1/3 of a cup, then you would just take this information and cut it in half. You would then only be getting around 115 calories. You would only be getting 4 grams of fat, half of the amount of carbohydrate. Can't do that math that quick in my head. A couple of grams of fiber. Therefore, you get the picture. Now, if you decide you want to eat a little bit more, then you would obviously have to add back, another half to that as well. Another change on this label is that they have changed the nutrients that they list. And they took off vitamin C because it was less likely that folks were deficient in that, and they added vitamin D. Vitamin D is a little bit harder to get in through your food, so many folks do need a supplement. So I think that the thinking was, let's put the vitamin D on there because people may need to look for that more. It is a common supplement that we need. Calcium is there. Potassium was newly added, which is something sometimes folks have to watch for different reasons, whether it's medication they're on, their kidney function, or whatnot. And then lastly, the amounts of those micronutrients were added where that was not there before. Another quick little tip is the percent daily value. That is something that you can use as a quick, estimation of how these nutrients may or may not fit into your goals. These are based on a 2,000 calorie diet, which is around what the average American would have. Now, you may or may not eat that much, but it still could be used as a good estimate for that nutrient and how it pertains to you. Think of 5% as considered low for that nutrient and 20% as considered high, because this is based on the recommended dietary intakes for this particular nutrient per day. So 5% would be considered low, 20% would be considered high. So if you're looking to watch fat, especially saturated fat, you can see that this product would be on the low end. If you're wanting to maximize fiber in your diet, you can look across and see that this particular product has 14% of the daily recommended amount, which is closer to the high end. So that's a good thing. So you can see by quickly kind of looking at this label and picking and choosing your serving size that you might be able to get an idea of how this may or may not fit into your healthy goals. So what about apps? This is the last section of our PowerPoint. I wanted just to share a couple of apps that may be useful to you. These are free. This first one is called Foodgicate, and it's actually pretty cool. It has lots of different features. You can even track your intake on it. But one feature that I thought was great was where you can take this, the scanner feature, and you can scan a food right there in the grocery store using the barcode, and it will assign a letter grade to that food, just like we have, when we're in school, A through F probably. You can see some of it here. I copied and pasted a screenshot there. Some of these got A's, B's, C pluses, and minuses even. And then it also gives you some other relevant health information about that food. And if you decide you want the food, great. Otherwise, it also offers an alternatives tab. If you decide, oh, I don't know that that's a great choice for me, you can click on the alternatives tabs and it'll give you a better product that might suit your what you're looking for. The next one is called Shopwell. And this is another great scanning kind of app when you're in the grocery store. And it has a database of over 400,000 foods. It also can personalize it by giving you food recommendations based on what you've told it. And then it also has this really cool feature where it can help you locate things in your own local grocery store based on, where they might put things. It also will keep a list or a history of foods that you have bought, and then you can use that in the future or to share them with family and friends.
All right. Thank you, Tiffany. If you do need to reach out to us, you can contact us at wellness@fhcp.com. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.